If you feel like the world is more divided, more uncertain and volatile than ever before, you're not imagining things. But what if I told you that this has all happened before? Kind of like that famous Mark Twain saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Well, we've probably been here not just once, but about every 80 to 100 years. Today, I want to help you zoom out to see the forest through the trees and understand where we are in the grand cycle of history and what that means for your money, your future, and potentially even our country. Hi, I'm Zachariah Montera, a private wealth manager and certified financial planner with Fross and Fross Wealth Management, located here in Central Florida. We specialize in helping retirees and pre-retirees navigate times just like this with clarity, confidence, and a plan. Whether you're managing a retirement investment strategy or planning your legacy or just trying to make sense of the markets and everything else going on, we're here to help guide you through it all. So back to history and where we are potentially in this cycle. In today's world, we've been inundated with headline after headline, and the world that we were in 2 weeks ago doesn't even exist today. It's hard to keep up with it all, so it's very helpful to zoom out and see where we might be in the grand scheme of things. And so I like to look at history, and I found this theory that was published in a book in 1997 by historians William Strauss and Neil Howe called The Fourth Turning. And their theory suggests that history does not move in a straight line, as we often like to think of it. Instead, it's more of a cycle lasting about 80 to 100 years, and they're divided into four turnings. Think of it like a seasonal cycle: spring, summer, fall, winter. So the first spring would be a high, which is a period of strong institutions and collective confidence. Think of us leaving World War II and rebuilding the country after that. Then we have an awakening, an era of spiritual renewal where we question the established norms that have been put in place. Think of Woodstock, 1970s, Vietnam. And then, coming after that, is an unraveling where institutions weaken and individualism rises. Think of 1980s, mid-1990s. And then there's a crisis, a decisive era of upheaval and transformation. Think of what we're living in right now, or the period of the Great Depression and World War II. So currently, we are believed to be in a fourth turning or a winter season, which is a time of significant change and challenge that most likely started with the financial crisis back in 2008. So does this mean that we have a crystal ball going forward? No, of course not. We don't have the ability to predict what's going to happen next, but just like the seasons of nature, we can recognize the signs of the seasons. And sometimes we have a short winter, sometimes we have a long winter. Some are colder, some are warmer. And even when it is spring, we might still see ripple effects of the winter that just passed. I vividly remember growing up in Colorado and it being April or May and still getting a snowstorm, even though it's been springtime for a couple weeks now. And that's much like the periods of history that we go through. And so what does this mean for us today? Well, if we just go back a little bit in history, thinking back to the ending of World War II, the GI generation coming back home, rebuilding America, establishing new institutions, and putting in place what we still use today. And then some of those institutions started to fall apart in the 1970s. Think of us leaving the gold standard and backing away from that. When we did that, that really solidified the dollar as the reserve currency of the global economy. And I'm going to explain what that means in just a second and help simplify it, because it is a concept that can be hard to grasp, even for myself at times. So going back to the 1970s, after we left the gold standard, and with China entering the World Trade Organization, we started sending out our dollars, our government debt, and our stocks abroad, meaning our largest export, still true today, our largest export is our financial system in the United States. So yes, we have a trade deficit with countries, especially like China, where we import more goods coming into the country than what we make here. And those supply chains can be very troublesome, especially during times of supply chain issues like we saw during COVID. We all remember that. But that doesn't mean we don't export anything. yes, we don't make a lot of things here, but we export our financial system, because think of it in terms of a game of Monopoly. Now, if you and I were just talking and I gave you some Monopoly money, you really wouldn't be able to do much with that. I mean, you might put it in your pocket or take it home and save it for the next time you're playing Monopoly, but most people wouldn't do that. You'd probably just give it back to me because it doesn't have a purpose unless you're playing the game of Monopoly. And with those Monopoly dollars, you want to buy properties, you want to improve them, you want to collect rent, maybe you want to buy utilities and get the railroads. The whole point is that you want to have a return on your investment within the game. Now think of that in the global economy, where we, like let's say a Chinese company, for instance, would sell goods to the United States. They sell goods to us, they receive dollars in return. Now they have their own currency in China that's not the dollar. So what do they do with those dollars? Well, for the purposes of this video, I'll simplify it and just say there's a couple things that they can do. Number one, they can buy our stocks. So they'll reinvest that money into our stock market, or they'll reinvest that money into our real estate market, or they'll reinvest that money into our bond market, like the US Treasury bonds or corporate bonds. So when the government debt continues to go up every single year, we fund those programs by people buying treasury bonds. We've been doing it a lot for clients where we're buying T-bills, treasury bonds, things like that. We're all familiar with that now, especially with higher interest rates. Well, other countries are doing the exact same thing. So what's been taking place over the last year, and really since 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine, is that our financial system's brand, think of our brand like Apple or Amazon, that brand has had a few instances where other countries are starting to look at that brand and say, you know what, I don't know if I can trust this brand anymore. And the reason is really going back to Russia invading Ukraine, especially from the Chinese perspective and a couple other countries. If, for instance, with Russia, they had a lot of these dollars, they had a lot of these investments held within their banks and institutions. They had a lot of our treasury bonds. Well, when they invaded Ukraine, our government put on sanctions, meaning that we froze those assets within their country, meaning they can't withdraw them. Those treasury bonds that you have, you can't have them. Those stocks that you have, those dollars that you have, they can no longer be used. They cannot be withdrawn. We will not honor them. So what does that tell every other country who does business with us if they might have an idea or they recognize that there's a risk in the future, no matter who the president is, there's a risk in the future that, you know what, we might recognize them or see something that they're doing as a threat, and in order to punish and enforce our global authority, we will freeze those assets. So what has happened a lot since 2022 is a lot of these countries started moving, instead of keeping those dollars, they just took those dollars and started buying gold or other commodities like copper and other things like that. And so what does that mean for us today? Well, what it means, especially within our portfolios and everything like that, is that as our investment committee meets over the next coming months and throughout the end of the year, this is something that will be top of mind and something that we're discussing very frequently is, where do we take our investments right now? Do we focus more on international? Do we look on maybe just lowering our exposure to the United States stock market and buying more stocks internationally? Because maybe long term, it's best to be more diversified than we have been traditionally. We've been overweight to the United States traditionally over the last couple of years, and that's benefited us very much. But we could very well be entering a period where international markets outperform simply because those dollars that other countries are receiving, they're putting in other places, whether it's gold, their own stock market, their own bond market, or trading it back and forth with each other instead. And so that's one of the potential scenarios that could be unfolding throughout this. And it's very, very common to see in a fourth turning in winter season. It's no coincidence that during the last fourth turning winter season, we had the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act that coincided with going into the Great Depression. It's not what caused the Great Depression, but it certainly did not help things. And a lot of the institutions that were created during that time are still with us today. And so that's what I want to leave you with, is that take heart in knowing that every winter season does come to a close. this season of division and calamity and all the uncertainty, a lot of this will go away at some point. There will be a springtime again. It's hard to see, but I promise you, if I read you some of these headlines and newspaper articles about FDR and what was going on in the 1930s and even the late 1920s, we were extremely divided back then. And it's pretty remarkable because you can cover up the date on the newspaper and you feel like you're reading what's going on today. So just take heart in knowing that we've been here before. We will get through this. We will pass through. I think our biggest advantage as the United States is that we're completely unpredictable, which is a great thing because it's led to our innovation, and certainly we are strongest when we innovate and come together, and we will come together again, I'm certain of that. And so I just want to give you a broader picture of where we might be and give you some insights into some of the things that we're thinking about and examining as we're making changes to our investments here within the firm. So with that, I will leave you until next time. Take care.